I've been working on covering my jean jacket in patches for the past few years and decided to add a few more anime characters. I chose to embroider these two specific scenes because they have such vivid colors and they're from animes that I love. I settled on scenes from Michiko and Hatchin and Demon Slayer. I just found the images I wanted online. I traced them on a separate layer using Procreate to create the embroidery design, and then I printed it onto water-soluble stabilizer. Once I had my designs, I spent a while picking out all the right colors and shades of embroidery floss. Here I have all the designs and all the floss I chose for both embroideries. I ended up using most of these colors plus a few extras to finish the patches. I start off by taking a square of white cotton cloth and securing it to my embroidery hoop. I want the fabric to be taut, so it takes a bit of adjusting. Next, I remove the backing from the design and stick it onto the fabric. I'm working on Zenitsu first from Demon Slayer. I like to start by adding a few stitches to the outline or outside the embroidery to make sure the design lays flat while I work. Next, I go in with my first color and I start filling in with satin and long and short stitches. I usually like to start with a few stitches across the areas that I'm going to be filling with a specific color, just so I'm not constantly checking the reference photo. I also like to go in at this point and map out the direction the stitches will be going in. I sometimes end up changing the direction based on how this looks, and it's a lot easier to make this change when I haven't already begun filling in of like a full area. I went in with all of the darker shades first before moving on to the jacket, mostly because I knew switching between multiple shades was going to be necessary. For me, it's easier to work with multiple shades or colors at once, each with their own needle, so I don't have to constantly rethread each one when I switch between them or cast off to change colors. This can make things a little chaotic sometimes on the hoop, so I'll sometimes roll them up to keep them out of the way while I stitch. I finished filling in the rest of the embroidery with mostly satin and also long and short stitches. Once Zenitsu was finished, I started working on the more difficult of the two embroideries. This was a scene from the intro of Michiko and Hatchin, and I've always really loved the vibrant colors and the way the characters look. After adding an outline to the whole design, I went in and started filling in the design, which took for fucking ever. I generally enjoy embroidery, but this guy was like the most tedious thing ever to finish, even though it really only took 3 colors. I filled in Michiko and Hatchin next. I don't have any footage from that, but I basically went in with about 8 colors for each and first filled in small areas before outlining them with a single strand of black floss. Unless I'm using a lot of black like on the bikes here, I like to outline as I fill in areas rather than outlining at the end or the beginning. I think it ends up looking neater that way, but it's just a personal preference. For the bike, I start off by outlining and filling in the areas that are black. I love stitching with black floss because it's very forgiving, so I went in and filled out the bike and the rest of the background. I did fill in a few parts of the bike with orange and yellow near the bottom because I was trying to decide how to blend them together, but I moved on to the trees in the background before finishing the rest. The trees were a pain to fill in, but thankfully they didn't have to be super neat because they were in black. I then finished filling in the bike with mostly satin and long and short stitches. With both of the embroideries finished, I cut out some iron-on backing and ironed it onto the back of the embroideries. At this point, I realized I forgot to wash off the water-soluble stabilizer. Definitely do that before you add the backing. I ended up just cutting the patches and covering the stabilizer with an edge because I didn't want to deal with removing it. When adding edges to patches, I like to keep the iron-on backing covered. I find that it helps keep the stitches even, and it's easy enough to remove after. I'm going in with black embroidery floss and adding a tight whip stitch to the edge of the Michiko and Hatchin patch. I like to add a little Mod Podge to the corners of the patch that has sharp edges because it helps the floss stay in place. I then carefully remove the backing. I added a white edge to the Zenitsu patch using the same method. To cast off, I like to weave the remaining thread through previous stitches a few times and then trim out the excess thread. These are the finished patches. I really love how both of them turned out. The colors are super vibrant, and I think I was able to do them justice. Once I had it in place, I put some cotton cloth over the top of the patch and ironed for a few seconds before letting it cool a bit and then ironing a little bit more. I then went in with a very loose whip stitch to secure the edges. This is how it looks on the inside of the jacket, and this is how the patches look now that they've been added. I think they came out perfect. Thanks for watching.